Now, if I ask you to describe the difference between an atheist and an agnostic, there's a good chance you'll reach for a philosophical or epistemological difference. Something about levels of certainty, or what can and can't be known about the existence of God. Atheism is often defined as the positive belief that no God exists. The individual has come to a cognitive conclusion. Agnostics, on the other hand, hold the question of whether God exists as ultimately unknowable, or at least unresolvable, a suspension of judgment rather than a verdict. But a brand new study just published this year in the International Journal for the Psychology of Religion suggests there's a whole dimension we've been overlooking. The difference between atheism and agnosticism is not purely epistemological. It's also emotional. It turns out that agnostics, on average, report more spiritual struggles compared to atheists. They wrestle more with doubt, with ultimate meaning, and with their own moral conduct. They're more anguished, more unsettled, more existentially restless. But at the same time, agnostics have more positive feelings about God compared to atheists. Agnostics picture God as more loving and less cruel, and they feel a stronger pull toward God. So the difference between these two groups is not just about cognition or reasoning. It's emotional, it's relational, and understanding that changes a lot about how we think about nonbelief. The study was led by Dr. Julie Exline, a psychologist at the University of Virginia who has spent much of her career studying spiritual struggle. She worked with a team including the scholar Kenneth Pargament, who, for what it's worth, is one of the major figures in the modern psychology of religion. He basically built the field of how people cope religiously with stress and suffering. So this is not a fringe project. These are some of the most established researchers in the psychology of religion. But first, a word about definitions, because these terms atheism and agnosticism get constantly muddled. The researchers are pretty careful about how they use these terms. An atheist in this study is someone who holds a positive belief, specifically the belief that no God or gods exist. Some atheists are very firm about this, and they would say they know no gods exist, and they have no doubts about it. The researchers call these folks closed atheists. Others, called open atheists, concede that, sure, it's possible that some God exists, but they themselves don't believe in one. Either way, though, they've taken a stance on the question. Agnosticism, on the other hand, is a suspension of judgment. Agnostics say, I don't know whether a God or gods exist. Closed agnostics go further and say, nobody can know, and open agnostics say, maybe someone could figure it out, but right now we can't. The common thread is uncertainty, and the researchers emphasize that this uncertainty is not just intellectual, it actually comes out of their personality. It comes with a certain disposition: skepticism, openness, and crucially, doubt. Now, I know some of you are already typing in the comments, actually, atheism is not a positive belief. It's simply a lack of belief in God. Or maybe, I'm an agnostic atheist, and these are not mutually exclusive categories. And look, those are perfectly valid ways to use these terms. There's a long-running debate in philosophy and scholarship on religion about whether atheism should be defined narrowly as a positive claim that no gods exist, or more broadly as simply not holding a belief in any gods. Depending on your definitions, agnosticism and atheism could overlap, and you could be both at once. The researchers here are aware of this debate, and they've made a deliberate choice to use the narrower definitions because it lets them isolate two psychologically distinct groups. They're saying for the purposes of this study, we need to draw a line between people who've actively concluded that God doesn't exist and people who've suspended judgment on that question. And when you draw that line, interesting differences start to show up. And the reason Exline and her team wanted to separate these groups in the first place is that surveys often lump them together under one label, like nuns or non-believers or non-religious. And when you start to do that, you start missing patterns. Prior research has already indicated that there are big differences between people who call themselves agnostics and those who call themselves atheists. For example, prior research has shown that agnostics tend to score higher on what psychologists call neuroticism, which just means they're more emotionally reactive, more prone to anxiety and worry, and more sensitive to negative experiences. They also tend to be more open to experience, more drawn to novelty, new ideas, and unfamiliar perspectives. Atheists, on the other hand, tend to score higher on measures of analytical thinking and tend to place a stronger value on seeing themselves and their beliefs as rational. Now, none of this means atheists aren't empathetic or that agnostics aren't logical. These are average tendencies across large sample sizes. They are not personal profiles of any one individual. But Dr. Exline and her colleagues wanted to push further. Specifically, they wanted to get at the emotional side of non-belief. And the tool they used to get at this is spiritual struggle. This is Dr. Pargament's framework that he developed over decades. The idea is that religion and spirituality are not always pleasant. They can be a site of conflict, strain, and tension. And this can happen for religious and non-religious people alike. The religious and spiritual struggle scale breaks these struggles into 6 types. The first is ultimate meaning struggle. This is existential ache, the worry that your life might not have a deep purpose. Are we here for a reason? Is any of this going anywhere? These are struggles over meaning. Second is interpersonal struggle around religion. This is the social stuff. Arguments with family about faith, feeling judged or rejected by a religious community, being angry at organized religion. Anything where religion becomes a source of conflict with other people. Third is doubt struggle. Doubt that actually bothers you, where you're not sure if what you believe is true and it's genuinely troubling. Fourth is moral struggle. This is guilt, wrestling with your own conduct, feeling bad about things you've done, worrying that you failed to live up to a standard. You don't need to be religious to have moral struggles, but religion often amplifies these struggles. Fifth is demonic struggle. This is feeling like you're being tempted or attacked by evil spiritual forces, the devil, demons, malevolent presences. This one, unsurprisingly, is usually low among non-religious people, though it's not always zero. And number 6, the one that matters the most for this study, is divine struggle. Divine struggle is tension directly with God, feeling angry at God, feeling abandoned by God, feeling afraid of God. The strange thing about divine struggle is that you don't technically need to believe in God to have it. You can be angry at a God that you're not sure exists. You can feel betrayed by a God that you've already concluded isn't real. Prior research has already shown that this happens, and Exline's team wanted to dig in. So here's what they did. They recruited adults who identified as either atheist or agnostic for a survey. The sample was mostly American, mostly from Christian backgrounds, mostly white, and mostly had at least some college education. So right up front, that's an obvious limitation, and the authors are upfront about it. The survey asked about a lot of things: certainty of non-belief, how long they've been non-believers, how religious or spiritual they currently feel. It asked them to rate all 6 types of spiritual struggle over the past few months. It asked about their reasons for not believing in God, and it asked them what their mental image of God was like. Is this God loving, distant, cruel? And the survey came with 2 pretty clever hypotheticals. The first is, imagine you were suddenly presented with clear, unequivocal evidence that God actually exists. How would you feel? And the participants were asked to rate a whole list of emotions: happiness, love, relief, fear, anger, confusion, guilt, plus 2 specific items. Would you feel a sense of freedom or a loss of freedom? The second hypothetical was what they call the doorway prompt. Imagine you're standing in a doorway and God is on one side of it. Would you want to walk toward God, stay where you are, or move away? Now, these might seem like slightly weird questions to ask a non-believer. Like, why are you asking me what I do if the thing I don't believe in suddenly showed up? But they're actually designed to bypass the intellectual question of whether God exists, trying to go straight at the emotional question of how you would feel about the possibility. Okay, on to the results. Starting with spiritual struggles, agnostics scored higher than atheists on the struggle scale overall, and they scored higher on 5 of the 6 subscales: ultimate meaning, moral, doubt, divine, and demonic. The only category where they tied was interpersonal struggles around religion, but on everything else, agnostics were wrestling more, and the doubt struggle gap was huge. In other words, agnostics scored much higher on the sense that their beliefs might be wrong in ways that actually troubled them. This was especially true for what they call open agnostics, the ones who think it might be possible to figure out whether God exists. They had the highest levels of spiritual struggle of anybody in the study, higher than closed agnostics and higher than either kind of atheist. The researchers suggest this is because the questioning posture of an open agnostic extends beyond the question of God. If you're the type of person that says, I don't know, but I think we can figure it out, that openness seems to come with a whole package of existential wrestling. Next is desire to believe. The researchers asked straight up, regardless of what you actually believe, how much do you want to believe in God? Open agnostics on the high end scored 58, and closed atheists on the low end scored 9.8. So there's a huge gap in desire here. Agnostics on average are meaningfully drawn to the idea that God might exist. Atheists on average are not. Then there's the image of God. Even though neither group believes in God, both can describe what they imagine God would be like if God existed. And here agnostics and atheists paint very different pictures. Agnostics picture God as substantially more loving, less distant, and less cruel than atheists do. In other words, the God the atheist doesn't believe in is on average a harsher, colder, and more unpleasant figure than the God the agnostic doesn't believe in. What about the results for reasons for non-belief? Both groups ranked intellectual reasons at the very top. Atheists and agnostics both see themselves as coming to their position rationally, but atheists emphasized intellectual reasoning more heavily than agnostics did. Atheists also scored higher on intuitive reasons, the sense that disbelief just feels right on some deeper level. Agnostics, meanwhile, scored a bit higher on what the researchers called relational reasons, which basically means divine struggle. Anger, hurt, or disappointment leveled against God contributed to their unwillingness to believe. And interestingly, and this is one of the more subtle results, atheists were more likely than agnostics to say that negative emotions about the possibility of God's existence played a role in their non-belief. In other words, atheists are more likely to admit that they don't want God to exist, and that's part of why they don't believe. Okay, so what about those two hypothetical scenarios? What if God showed up tomorrow, undeniably real? Both groups said that their top response would be confusion, which is understandable. I think even theists would be deeply disoriented if God suddenly showed up. But after confusion, the emotional profiles split sharply. Agnostics said they'd feel significantly more positive emotions: happiness, love, relief, hope, and significantly less anger. Atheists, on the other hand, reported they'd feel more anger, and crucially, they'd feel a loss of freedom. They experienced the hypothetical as a kind of imposition. And finally, the doorway scenario. Agnostics, when asked whether they'd approach God, stay still, or move away, were significantly more likely to say they'd approach. Atheists, on the other hand, were just as likely to want to move away as to approach. In fact, closed atheists, the most committed group, wanted to move away from God more than they wanted to move toward God. This suggests that for a subset of non-believers, non-belief is not just a neutral intellectual position. It's an active emotional presence for distance. There's a God they don't believe in, and if that God showed up, they would head the other way. So how do the researchers make sense of all this data? Agnostics and atheists both share something important. Neither of them believe in God. But underneath that shared label, they're in a very different emotional and relational space. The agnostic is someone who's still, in some sense, oriented toward the question of God. They're unsettled precisely because the question remains open for them. They picture God as mostly benevolent. They want to believe, and they carry the weight of real spiritual struggle because the whole matter is still alive in their minds. The atheist, on average, has closed the question, which may explain why they experience less spiritual struggle. Part of this might be tied to imagining a God who's not very appealing in the first place, a God who's cruel, distant, and unavailable. That image makes non-belief not just correct, but preferable. It protects against the possibility of a coerced or unwelcomed relationship with a harsh God. For atheists, the prospect of being wrong about God is possibly a threat to their autonomy. Okay, so let's zoom out and talk about why all of this matters. The researchers say that their goal was to contribute to a growing body of scholarship showing that agnostics and atheists differ, and how grouping them together loses important information. Because for a long time in both academic research and casual discourse, non-believers has been treated as one undifferentiated group. Though the study builds on earlier research that there are different kinds of non-believers, with different personalities, different emotional textures, different relationships to the idea of the divine, and completely different reasons for why they ended up there. It also builds on research showing that people leave religion for a lot of reasons other than rationality. We tend to assume that people arrive at their religious positions, belief, disbelief, or whatever, through some kind of careful reasoning process. That belief or unbelief is a conclusion that you arrived at after weighing the evidence, but there's a lot of research now suggesting that's mostly not how it works. We talked about this in an earlier video, but the scholar Will Gervais, for example, has argued that belief in God spreads primarily through what he calls credibility-enhancing displays, or creds. Basically, people come to believe in religions when they see other people around them acting in a way that makes that belief look costly, sincere, and real. When you see your parents pray every day, or give up something meaningful for their faith, or endure hardships because of their religion, that visible commitment is what makes the belief stick. When you don't see those credibility-enhancing displays, belief doesn't take root in the first place, which means secularization is not primarily about reasoning or about science disproving religion. What the Exline study adds to that picture is the emotional and relational layer. Non-belief is not just about logic. It's not just about rationality. It's about what kind of God you'd be dealing with if God existed, whether you actually want to believe in God or not, and whether the whole prospect makes you feel free or trapped. These things don't feel like the kinds of factors that belong in a philosophical argument, but they may be the factors that actually drive where most people end up. And I keep thinking about this idea of credibility-enhancing displays, because the whole idea of practice what you preach really does apply to a lot more than just religion. It's really hard to convey values of any kind, whether they are political, ethical, or environmental, through words alone. Visible action is way more effective. That's part of why I joined Planet Wild. Planet Wild is basically crowdfunding for nature, a community of over 20,000 members pooling their memberships together every month to fund one carefully selected conservation mission, like restoring lemur habitats in Madagascar, supporting indigenous forest patrols in the Brazilian Amazon, and literally saving baby seals washing up all alone on the southern shores of the Baltic Sea. And what I like about it is that the whole thing is built around visible commitment and results. You don't just send your money into the void. They have a truly unique model wherein within 30 days they put out a video on YouTube documenting exactly where my funding went and what it actually accomplished. They also have written reports in the app if you want to dive deeper. And they're launching new missions every month. Just last month, they kicked off a mission in Brazil's savanna region called the Cerrado, the most biodiverse savanna on Earth, home to around 5% of all plant and animal species. Now, the world's attention understandably has been focusing on saving the Amazon rainforest, but a lot of the deforestation has shifted south to this savanna region. More than half of the Cerrado has been cleared in the last 50 years, mostly for soy production, and what's left is basically a scatter of isolated fragments. So the Planet Wild community is supporting building what will be the longest biodiversity corridor in South America, a 2,600-kilometer stretch of restored land that reconnects those fragments and links the Cerrado back to the Amazon. So if you want to turn caring about the planet into something visible and concrete, consider joining me and becoming a Planet Wild member. The first 100 people who sign up using my code RELIGION4 will get their first month paid for by me. And after that, you can contribute whatever you can and whatever feels right to you. Just scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description below. You'll have an immediate impact, you'll get a video report within 30 days showing exactly what your contribution has pulled off, and you can cancel anytime with no questions asked. And if you want to see Planet Wild in action, check out their Cerrado Biodiversity Corridor mission right here.